Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, Phoenix.new was opened to the public. So that's Phoenix.new. And this is the application or service that Chris McCord has been teasing and talking about for a long time. He actually talked about it at ElixirConf EU, and it was you can participate on a wait list, but now it is actually open to the public. And it is really quite insane. It's like vibe coding a Phoenix app, but vibe coding on steroids, right? Like this, you have to check out some of the videos. We're linking to an X thread where there's some different videos demoing some of these points. But, the best way to check it out is to go try it yourself. It does some insane stuff like remote AI runtime for full stack app building, GitHub workflows, and more. It even has like a full in-browser IDE and a terminal with root on a virtual machine that's running on fly. Then you can even share a preview URL to that running application as it's being coded with a friend or someone else you want to show it to and have them interact with it. And then the agent works with or without you present, has a full headless browser that interacts with the app. So you can see this little pop-up, picture-in-picture kind of little video of your application running on a separate machine, and you're seeing it there.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then like the AI agent has access to what's being displayed on the screen. It can actually interact through the running app, and it can actually get access to the browser logs and the console logs. So it is like really able to do stuff and fix stuff very rapidly and really iterate. So there's a lot more that we could say about this, but we're not gonna. Because if you stick around after the news, we're going to have Chris McCord join us to talk about this in greater detail. So stay tuned for that.
Oof, pumped.
Yes.
All right. Next up, Ecto 3.13 was released. There's a couple of cool things happening in this release, so we'll go over a couple of them. First up is that Elixir has built-in JSON support. I don't know if you remember that, right? Everyone's probably still using JSON, but Ecto now supports Elixir's built-in JSON module, which is pretty nice. Maybe a more impactful one, though, is that this release now includes Ecto repo.transact, which is a popular alternative to maybe using Ecto multi. And maybe a wow moment is it's going to actually soft deprecate repo transaction, where you would pass in, just a regular old function or the Ecto multi. Yeah. So it's soft deprecate, which means you're not going to know it. There's no loggers. I don't think that's just the direction they want to go, which it sounds good to me. Really, I don't see any downsides to this. Though I am curious of what would you pass an Ecto multi into if transaction is not there. I guess transact is still the case. All right. Also, adding support for @schema redact all except primary keys. So when you use a schema, in the schema you can define fields, and in those fields there's an attribute you can set as redact true or false. And that's going to inform how Ecto schema should represent your schema in anything that logs it, really. If you didn't want to go through each of those fields and just say redact true, redact true, redact true, what you could do now instead is just say for the whole schema, just redact everything except for them helpful primary keys, because there's nothing unsafe about them, I reckon, right? Let's see, two more. Adding Ecto repo all by, right? So that's a new function, repo.allBy, which will act like repo.getBy. Repo getBy is only for one record, right? So you just, it's a really easy API, right? Repo getBy, you pass in the schema in there, but then the fields that you want in a like a keyword list kind of way, right? GetBy, my field equals true, and that's it. And then it'll find the first one that matches that and return it, or nil. All by is the same thing, but it's all of the records that match that, right? If you're like me, you might write your get by, your really easy keyword based filtering, and then you realize, I don't know, I actually need all of them, which means that now I have to import Ecto query and then write it like with the whole query syntax they have. Yeah, and then you kind of have to reapproach how you write this thing. But now if it's still an easy query, the complex things still need that Ecto query API. But if it is as simple as just a couple of keyword lists in there, nothing fancy, then now you can look at repo.allby, which is pretty nice. Last one I'll mention is there's another API function here called constant, helpful in queries in cases where you might need to inject a variable directly into the query instead of via a query parameter, right? So the example they have in their docs here is like, if you needed to like interpolate the limit in there, like I'm going to query for all these, but I only need 10 of them. And limit is, a parameter here, or you need to do it through a fragment of some sort. You don't really want to do that with a query parameter. That's not very helpful. So in this case, you can pass it in as a constant now. So it'll be put right into the query directly, which is pretty nice. The example they have is using that function constant with a fragment. Maybe it's a toy example. I'm sure it's going to be more helpful in other cases. All right. Well, there's more in the changelog. If you're deep into Ecto land, you're going to want to check out this release. There's more than usual. So this is a good release to go check out. We got a link to the changelog.
And next up, NX version 0.10 was released. So this includes some improvements to documentation, including a new advanced guides and revamped getting started section and cheat sheets for comparisons between NX and NumPy. And then there's also floating point constants now take the precision of the surrounding operations, improving precision for F64 calculations. And there's a number of other improvements as well. But I think it's really important to appreciate the improved guides and getting started and cheat sheets. Like that is where you land if you're saying, how do I get started with NX? And putting time into that, it's not generated from your module docs or anything like that. Like you have to take time to actually spend to make this more accessible. Appreciate that. And so a new release in NX.
Nice. Next up, Phoenix 1.8 is getting official security documentation. So it's featured on a new blog post on Paraxial.io. Paraxial.io does a lot of the security consulting for the Elixir community, and they contributed this guide as well. And so it adds a lengthy new guide just simply called Security. So you're going to find it now, like when you go to HexDocs, you go to Phoenix, you're going to see a new guide over there just called Security. It's a really great new addition. It really shows and helps, the community how to do things well with good practices. So it covers the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities for Phoenix applications. So just a quick run through of what those are. It's talking about remote code execution, SQL injection, server-side request forgery, cores misconfigurations, broken access control, which is probably the most common one in my opinion. Basically your code. Cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, CSRF tokens and stuff. So definitely a required reading, for dev teams. And I don't know, since everyone's talking about AI, this is probably one of those things that needs to go into your .claude or .agents file that says, when writing Phoenix code, review this document, and make sure you don't add any vulnerabilities because they will just interpolate anything anywhere, right?
Yeah. What I like about it being part of the guides is I imagine like that new user coming to Phoenix because they've just heard about Phoenix.new and this is an amazing thing. They want to vibe code a Phoenix app and they're looking at the Phoenix docs, and having a security thing right there in the Phoenix docs is just it's like the first place people are going to see it. And then, yes, it also links out to other resources with the EEF and the security working group and things like that. But just to put it in people's faces and make it very accessible.
Yeah.
And next up, Zach Daniel has launched another Hex package called evals. And it's under the Ash project's GitHub org, but it actually is quite independent of Ash. To understand what this is, when you start to really integrate AI into your applications, you start to encounter issues where sometimes the prompt fails to accomplish your task, even when the same prompt and the same inputs, and it worked the other time, like it'll work and work and work, and then it fails because it's not deterministic. There's intentional random factors being included in the behavior. And then you got to consider that not all models are equally good at a given task. Gemini is better at writing Go code. I've had much better results with Claude for Elixir code. Models will vary based on how they respond and act. So you might want to start to experiment and find out which model is the best for your task, for this particular task. And then you start tuning your prompts to increase your success rates. So that's where the evals project comes in. It is an evaluation tool for testing and comparing AI language models on various tasks. And this allows you to run structured evaluations, compare model performance with and without usage rules, and generate detailed reports. And it's all computer like friendly JSON type reports and stuff like that. So some of the features are, it includes multiple model support, evaluate and compare different language models side by side, can work with usage rules, code generation and validation, evaluate models on code writing tasks and automated assertion testing, rich reporting, generate summary or detailed reports with performance breakdowns. It even has YAML-based test definitions. So unless you're like super opposed to YAML, it's a great way to just have a described way of setting up your tests. But what this does is this makes it really easy to run the same prompt with controlled inputs over many iterations to evaluate, like the evals part, to evaluate and measure the success rate. So perhaps initially you're having a 72% success rate. So then you say, well, what if I tried this other model? Okay, maybe that got me a little bit better. And now if I tune my prompt and I'm going to give a 1 or 2 shot, like with examples, oh, now I can get up to 90%. And that's the out of 100 runs, I'm getting a 90% success rate. So it's a great tool to help do that AI development at scale, I guess is what I would think about. But yeah, very welcome addition to the rapidly growing field of Elixir AI tools.
Pretty exciting. I'm considering some additional tooling here soon as well. Not ready to announce it yet, but this is definitely a ripe area of development.
Yep.
So I'm curious how it goes. All right, changing course for a little bit. ElixirConf US speakers are being announced. Not the full suite of speakers quite yet, but they're starting to get populated on their website. So 2 keynotes that we know so far confirmed are José, Valim, and Chris McCord. Given, right? But then an additional 7 speakers so far. So check out ElixirConf.com. You'll find a keynotes section, speaker section, so you can find out if your favorite speaker is going to be there or not. It's going to be too late by the time this episode drops, but within the day is the today of recording is the last day for early bird pricing for ElixirConf. So sorry you missed it, but go get you some tickets.
Yep. And next up, Sasha Urick, who is a prominent member of the Elixir community. He wrote what I consider to be the best book on the language, Elixir in Action. Well, he has quite strong opinions, and he's spoken quite a bit and had some very influential talks, right? Some conference presentations that have really stood the test of time. So he has strong opinions on how things should be done, and he always backs them up with good explanations. So over the years, he's written various times and opinions on how to do project organization for directories and code and modules and naming and things like that. So recently he shared a collection of those writings along with a GitHub project that demonstrates the structure that he's talking about. So we've got a link to all those. I guess the short take is no on umbrella structures, and he likes to have the base directory that contains all the business logic to be called core, and everything that has your web portion would be called interface. And he also, so you can check this out in his GitHub project. He also uses a project called Boundary, which is his own library, which helps prevent the developer from reaching into deep modules somewhere else that they shouldn't be directly accessing. But, Elixir allows you to, because every module is globally available once it's all loaded in runtime. So it forces you to go to the API boundary layers. So it helps create better structured code. All I would say is keep in mind, you don't have to adopt or accept all of his ideas, but I do guarantee he will make you think. And honestly, I think that's probably the best outcome. You think more about the structure and making conscious decisions on your projects.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this is in reaction to some recent online community discussions about contexts in general with Phoenix. Just another reminder there, that's just a generator. So you don't have to do that either. You can kind of do whatever you need to. But it is interesting to think about. All right, last up, Sentry updates their Elixir SDK to include tracing support, which is really nice. If you're using Sentry, go check out version 11 and opt into their auto instrumentation and see how it goes. One of the good things I saw about it is that they leverage OpenTelemetry here, which means they're not rolling their own thing, which is fantastic to hear. We have a link to the changelog for instructions on how to opt into all that. But yeah, Sentry is a really great exception reporter. It looks like they're getting into the observability game as well to accept more signals than just exceptions. So pretty cool to see that.
And that's it for the news. Production monitoring can be complicated. There are tons of tools and techniques, but you just want to know that your app is up and your users are happy. When your customers encounter a problem, you need clear, actionable intelligence, not walls of charts and reams of logs. That's why they built Honeybadger, the monitoring tool you've always wanted. A tool that's there when you need it and gets out of your way when you don't. With Honeybadger, you'll know when critical errors occur and which customers are affected. Respond instantly when your systems go down. Improve the performance of your systems over time. Fix problems before your customers can report them. Honeybadger is the application health monitoring tool built for you, the developer who cares about a quality product and happy customers. And remember, Honeybadger now has APM, or Application Performance Monitoring, with support for Elixir traces out of the box. They also include default dashboards for major Elixir components, such as Ecto, Plug, Phoenix, LiveView, Oben, Absinthe, and Finch, which is used by Rec, and Tesla. Start monitoring today at honeybadger.io. It's free to get started, and setup takes less than 5 minutes. Once again, that's honeybadger.io. Today, we are being joined by our very special guest, Chris McCord. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm super glad you're able to come and join us. Now, I don't know that you need any introduction, but you are the creator of Phoenix. You've been with José on this journey since the very, very early days. You've written books. You're very active in the community. And you're, keynote speaker at all the conferences that you attend. So super happy to have you, because recently you released a new project or a product. You're gonna have to give us some more information about how you exactly classify this, but it's Phoenix.new or Phoenix.new, which is actually the website. And you teased this for a while. And then eventually at, I think it was ElixirConf EU, you said, hey, this is what it is. This is how it works. You demoed it and people could sign up or get on a wait list, but now it's public and it has gone big. A lot of people are talking about it. And I'm really happy that you can come on and tell us more about that. But before we get into that, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where it is you're working right now and what you're up to, just in big picture stuff.
Yeah, so I'm at fly.io. We're like a cloud hosting platform, let you, do your Heroku style stuff, or if you wanted to build an AI code generation runtime platform, you could also do that. So yeah, working there mostly on open source, but more recently on product work, and we can kind of talk about how that all came about. But yeah, day in, day out, my role at Fly is to more or less continue the Phoenix framework development and, somehow market the company, on my, let's say, 5 to 10% of my time. So most of that work has been gone in for the last, I'm in there for 4 years now, has gone into just working on Phoenix and Phoenix LiveView.
Awesome. Okay, so you teased some stuff. Like you said, we can talk about how this got started, but maybe we could just talk about what Phoenix.new is. Just if someone hasn't seen it yet, and maybe this is the first time they're hearing about it, how do you describe what it is?
Sure. Yeah. So it's bigger than what it is now. So yeah, I'll describe what it is now and then like what I feel like it's going to become. So right now it's more or less, I'm going to say, a vibe coding platform, right? Everyone's into these vibe coding things. You can give it a single prompt and it's going to build you a full working Phoenix real-time application. So if we just cut off the explanation there, I think it is quite compelling. So it's like, a lot of these vibe coding platforms will traditionally or typically build you a JavaScript app, right? It runs in your browser because your browser runs JavaScript and you're like, oh, this is compelling, it's cool. But Phoenix is a full stack framework and it's like you want to build, I'm going to say, real things, like things with a real database and use a file system. I think we're really compelling in that space of like vibe coding because we can actually build you a full stack real app, regardless of if you want to use Postgres, SQLite, like it's going to be able to talk to the database, do whatever it needs. And since Phoenix is all about real-time applications with Phoenix LiveView, Phoenix channels, it will just like our agent does that, right? So it's like, the system prompt is more or less like anything that should be real-time, make it real-time. So you're going to get things like you would expect out of Phoenix because the agent's basically instructed to make anything real-time as it should be, right? It's like what we say is the community. It's like, there's like almost no effort to make a LiveView page, show things as they're happening. So I think that is interesting and unique, and that's where people are seeing a lot of the value, and that's what it's like tuned for right now. So we can go into like where I see this going beyond, but like it turns out like in an effort to do this, I've kind of been on my own large language model journey. And these things, I'm going to use a word like decision. Like I'm using words that it's like they make choices and decisions that are far more than I would have thought, like with far less input. I thought it would be a lot more like coaxing to get these things to do what you want. And there is a lot of coaxing, but it turns out like I think what we really built is like what I'm calling a remote AI runtime. And that's like something that you can just like put on a task and let it go build things. So this is like on the level of like, I'm going to say Codex or Devin or Google released the Jules thing, which is very similar. So you have like the vibe coding platforms, and then you have these like async agent-y things that like take your GitHub and do some work. And I think that like we accidentally like built something that occupies both spaces. And like, it wasn't like a big leap to go from like, oh, this thing can vibe code to like, oh, you can just ask it to like go make a PR. Like I thought that would be a lot of work, but it turns out that like when you give the agent like shell and it can make choices, then like when you ask it to like, hey, can you go check out the issues on Phoenix and find something to work on? It just like calls the GitHub CLI and looks at the issues and makes choices, clones the repo, starts editing code, runs a test. So yeah, it's a vibe coding platform now. That's what people, I mean, that's what it's good for and really good at and optimized and tuned for. But like if you ask it to do Devin Codex type things, it actually does a reasonably be like great job at it. Like I think like I'm not gonna say we're like on par with Codex because I haven't like used that in anger, but like you can throw anything that you're throwing at it with like Codex or Devin, and it's probably gonna do the same job now. And there's like 3 sentences in the system prompt for that. Just because we give the agent everything, right? Like it's like we've taken like the dumber approach on like, here's root access, here's shell, you need app, just call app. Well, we don't even tell it just call app. It just, it knows it has shell, it knows it has root. So if you have to do something or you give it a project that needs an apt package, it's just going to do the thing, right? Like the developer would, right? So there's my long-winded answer for what this thing is. So if you sign up now, you can ask it to build you an app, or you can bring a new code base in and it can be like your pair assistant or your vibe coding platform. But I think that we're going to be able to push it much further than that as we're going forward.
That's a lot to digest. So folks that are
that fits in a tweet, right?
Yeah. Nowadays, I guess maybe it does. If you're into the AI scene, right, and you're following it, you're probably, following some subreddits or something like, r/Claude or r/MCP or things, right? And it seems like every 30 minutes, it's like a new JavaScript framework, right? Every 30 minutes, there's something brand new coming out. A lot of people are showing off like their workflows for how to vibe code basically. And you had mentioned like, you give this agent a bit of autonomy to say, go do this thing. And it just does all the things. The typical position, I think, for like locally running those things is to get some MCP server access to your machine with your GitHub, CLI authenticated to your things on your computer. And you might like have some like really nifty things where it can know about Git work trees, so it doesn't affect yours, or you can have multiple of these agents all working in their own work trees on the same code base, right? You said a keyword in there I want to dive into a little bit. It knows it has root access though. Tell me where Fly comes into this picture. Why is this not a local thing? Why, how helpful is it for, Fly and the infrastructure to be involved in this?
How this started was, we had a lot of these vibe coding platforms popping up last year. And we have, these vibe coding platforms as Fly customers. So part of this was just like, wouldn't it be great if, Elixir and Phoenix could have something similar? So this started more or less as just like an exploration to like how, there was a common idiom among people that like Elixir was at risk because agents are really good at JavaScript because there's so much JavaScript. And we can talk about that because like, it's like you hear these things and like it just becomes tribal knowledge. So it turns out like they're actually really fantastic at Elixir, and they make some really silly mistakes with JavaScript, and we can go into some of the like mechanics of like slapping these things on the wrist.
There's a lot more silly JavaScript out there that it's been trained on, I guess.
That's true. Yeah. So, but this started as like, so the thesis was, the Kurt is the Fly CEO. He calls this like maybe the greatest nerd snipe of all time. He basically, we're talking about this LLM space and, we're seeing a lot of growth from that kind of customer base building these platforms. So we knew that was like a big segment, but in where Elixir stood, and Kurt was like, well, what if you just like put a text area on a web page and had like a Fly machine generate a full stack Phoenix app? Like, wouldn't that be like a cool demo, right? Like, so we could actually show that like, well, one, like, Fly machines they're more powerful than just running JavaScript. So, this is a long answer, but we have a lot of customers building these platforms that are ultimately running sandboxes to run JavaScript, even though it can run in the browser. Obviously you want to be able to run JavaScript on the server. So it was like, one, it was kind of marketing. It was going to market the platform, be like, hey, look, you can sandbox JavaScript, but like you can do, literally whatever you want. And also we wanted to show that like these agents can actually do a really remarkable job doing Elixir and Phoenix. So it started as like text area web page, right? And it was going to be a, let's say 6 to 8 week spike of my time to kind of market Fly, then also would market Phoenix pretty well. And then like 6 weeks into it, I had like a LLM chat with like a VS Code in the browser. Like, basically like, it wasn't as good as it is now, but like the MVP of what you see today was there. It was like 6 weeks into it. It was like, whoops, we have like a vibe code thing that like has a full IDE in the browser. And so this is how this started. And then it was like, well, let's see what we can do with this. Like, can we actually make this like good? And then like Fly has a lot of mechanics for like, sending requests to specific machines. So I was able to add like the preview URLs in like no time at all. And then it was like, well, how do you get code onto the box? You can use GitHub, but then to clone or to copy your code, you'd have to like push it to your GitHub and pull it down. So then I wrote like a git proxy, which we fly replay to. So like your git clone commands just goes to like the Elixir Phoenix app, and we intercept that and fly replay to your running IDE and just proxy it through Git HTTP backend. Mm-hmm. So like all these things like came together remarkably quickly and turned into like an accidental product, I'd say. I mean, it's along the way we were like, okay, like, wow, like I think we have a product here. Let's try to make it a product. But it kind of accidentally started as just this like marketing for Fly, marketing for Phoenix text area on a web page. So that was kind of the inception of it, and now it's a real product you can pay for.
And so the root part of that, is that some of the special sauce here of like how much access it has that makes it do more than usual?
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth talking about too. Like I think this whole space, AI LLM space, is like overly complicated, and like it's making the solutions like overly complicated. Like I think everyone's starting with the thesis of like we have to like sandbox the code environment, we have to sandbox the agent because we don't want it to do anything nefarious or RMRF my home drive because we're running them locally. But like if you like invert it like we did, we were like, well, Fly machines are like they're sandboxed at the network level. They can reach the internet, well, if you allow them to, but they can't, hose your local host or reach the production database. So we started with like, we'll just give the agent everything and put the guardrails at the infrastructure level. And then like all these things become like easier. We run a headless web browser, so the agent, like one of the things people, I think is the most interesting thing we have is like you get a preview of the web page running, you can hit it via the internet, but the agent can also hit it with its own browser, and it just runs that with a shell command. Like there's a web shell command that runs headless Chrome, and that's like a 120 line JavaScript file. Just like people have asked if I would open source that. I mean, we need to license it, but like if you cat like user bin web2md.js, you can see it's there, it's on the box. And the fascinating thing is it's because like we give the agent all this and it can call shell. That means that like the headless web problem, I think, like I'm not knocking other programmers, but I think a lot of other companies to say, oh, well, we want to give the agent the same thing. They would start with the thesis of like, oh, well, we'll just stand up a headless Chrome web preview service. And like, that thing can be in, well, I'm going to say pull in Lambda. That thing can be in a Lambda because we're going to, this is expensive. We need a big pool of these things and we'll just like dole that out. And I was like, oh, how can I give it the ability to browse the web? I was like, well, we can run everything. I'll just put headless Chrome on the box, right? And then make it a shell command, and then boom. So that was like, 2 days of work to give it headless Chrome, and now all these things can use Chrome. So that's kind of where root comes in, where like we started with the since we have this sandbox machine that does it run locally, like you can just give it everything, and then it works really well because you're like, I want to make a web crawler, and then it's just going to start pulling in headless Chrome. I mean, well, it has headless Chrome already, but like it would just start pulling in the app packages that would be needed. Gotcha. And like sometimes like these are things that you don't even know need to exist, right? I mean, FFmpeg is a good example. One time I asked for like, I didn't know what version of Debian I was running, and it pulled in a couple packages. So it's like, it was immediately clear that like just starting with the thesis of giving it root actually like unlocked this superpower. Like I didn't, I didn't have this full intuition or appreciation before like I just started asking for stuff. And then it just goes into this recursive feedback loop of like, let me try to run the app. And it's like, oh, this package is missing, apt install. And like suddenly you just see this like week of work, right? Week of fiddling of like, oh, it didn't work. I'm missing some like whatever, like the .so errors. You know what I mean? Like the agent is just recursing on this. So root, I think, untaps a lot And it's in a way that you wouldn't want to run locally. And I think that like eventually these things will be good enough that you can trust them locally. So I don't think it's like necessarily forever. It's containerized in local dev now, but when I first started this, it was running completely on my Mac. So it's told it's on like a Debian system, but so on my Mac, it started trying to apt install I don't even, I've generated so many things now. For whatever reason, it needed a package. It tried to apt install, it saw apt wasn't installed, and these things are fast enough that like it just started going through. And then a second later, it was brew installing packages. So like, it's like it surmised that it was, oh, I'm on an OS X platform. And it's like, no, Control C, Control C. Yeah. So there's a reason I think, outside of, let's say, capital interest that it makes sense to run these things in the cloud, so to speak. But I also think that's like where we're headed. So like this is a bigger part of your root answer. And like it just makes sense to give the agent the tools it needs. And that like simplifies a lot and gives the agent like a ton of power to do whatever it wants. Like make GitHub PRs. Again, we didn't have to like this. I feel like a crazy person because like you look at like these companies, they'll do a whole press run on like these like GitHub integration features. Like Codex, makes sense. They've got deep integration on like you can wire up GitHub OAuth and it pulls these things down and does like neat things asynchronously. But then like I go to Phoenix.new and I'm just like, in the system prompt, I was like 3 sentences, like you have the GH GitHub CLI. It's already installed. And then you just ask it like to do the same things that you would ask Codex when they wrote a bunch of, I'm going to say like, human meets space code to like do this deep GitHub integration. And I just dropped the GitHub CLI on the box and it just does the thing, right? And there wasn't like all this glue code to talk to GitHub, to make sure you're OAuth, call the GitHub API. So anyway, there's just something really interesting about like starting with root and working your way up that was like almost accidentally powerful in a way that like we didn't appreciate.
Yeah. I liked how you said this on social media where someone was asking about MCP servers and it's just making that observation like, no, you don't have to have like an MCP server to talk to GitHub. You just tell it has the command and it has access to run CLI commands. So it can just do quite a lot just with that very generic, powerful tool.
Yeah, and we can riff on MCPs a little bit. Like I mean, it's a horrible spec that doesn't make sense to me. Like why it's
fully agree. By the way,
it's
building
stateful. It's stateful, but like everyone uses it in a stateless way. And so it's like a weird spec. And the second version is now to make it easier to make it stateful. But it's like on their own HTTP thing that's stateless. Yeah. Like it's like, why didn't they just use WebSockets anyway?
I know. I know.
The funny thing is like no one can do MCP servers well. It's like Elixir was like purpose built. We're like, yeah, this is no problem. But like all these other platforms are like you have to hold that state somewhere. Yeah. And then anyway. I won't go down that tangent other than to say that MCPs as an idea I think make total sense because like what we just talked about, like you suddenly give these agents tools to interact with the world and they do like incredible things. It's like the jump from like using the ChatGPT or Claude web chat is like it's that same model, but the moment you give it the ability to do stuff, like it just does stuff, and you're like, what? Like, I gave you that. I don't know. It's like it's this weird revelation where you're like giving these things tools, and then they use the tools, but they decide to use the tools. It's not like that you're telling them they have the ability, and then they use them. So MCPs make sense, but as implemented, I think everyone's just like. Again, overly complicating the space. Like there's a Playwright MCP server. So Playwright's the headless Chrome, a headless Chrome JavaScript library that our web tool uses. And again, that's 120 lines of JavaScript for the whole thing. And there's a Playwright MCP server, and that markdown file for the README of the description of the tools is more tokens than our entire source file. So it's like you have to, the way these tools, like MCP works is like you put all that into context and the agent has to decide to invoke dozens of different tools, which is like, there's like a mouse move tool. So it's like, there's like a ton of burned tokens and then like all these decisions you place on the agent, which we can talk about that too. Like the more choices the agent has, in my experience, the worse the quality is. Cause like, it's just like a person.
Yeah.
You're like, here's this sheet of paper of the things you can do, but then you also hand someone a rule book of like 10 pages and they're like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's like, I feel like we should give the agents sharp tools. Like you have a web browser, call web and give it a URL. If you want to run JS, --JS, boom. And then like there's no click tool, there's no mouse move tool, there's no hover tool. It's like all these things disappear. I'm trying to like start using the word hallucinate in like a positive way. The agent just hallucinates the JavaScript code that does what the tool call would have done. And so instead of 50 tool calls, you end up with like 3. So there's my MCP spiel. They're good, but I think we need to tone it down dumber MCPs with more powerful tools.
So some of these MCP servers are definitely being built incorrectly. They're imitating a normal JSON-based like API or something, very minute, instructions, very, very small instructions. But we don't talk to ourselves that way. We do maybe because we're developers, we're used to this. But like if you were to just talk to some, person on the street, you're not going to say use the mouse tool. Here you're just going to say like go browse to that site, and then watch them do it.
I also want to shout out, so like Tidewave MCP. There's confusion too on like where that aligns with Phoenix.new, but as I'm like dunking on MCPs, I do think like Tidewave has done it correctly. It's like Tidewave basically shares my exact same opinion. It's like there's an Elixir like eval tool, right? So like there's several different tools there, but they're very small, and like to do anything complex, you just give it the ability to evaluate Elixir. So it can go in and, set a trace, do whatever it wants instead of like all these bespoke tools. So I think,
right,
the MCP can be done really well and makes sense. And Tidewave is a good example of that.
I want to ask a few questions that are just big picture things too, before we jump into a little more of the details. So one, you said you built this, sounds like, your 6-week spike turned into like, wow, I almost have something that I could just really give. Were you the only one working on this, or was this part of a team within Fly? Like, who was building this?
Yeah, this has been mostly a solo effort up until recently. So we do have, it's myself and another person on it full time now, I think as of like maybe 6 weeks ago. And we also had another person at Fly actually came in and saved me from like the billing code. So like since ElixirConf EU, it was like, it'd be out, next week. And we pulled an OpenAI in the coming weeks is what I should have said. But fortunately, doing the glue code between billing systems and all that necessary work that needs to be done that, I got to ignore as having fun building these fun parts. Someone came in and has also been helping pretty tremendously for the last several weeks getting the billing stuff in place. So it's a few person effort right now, but most of it was solo until we got pretty close to launch.
Awesome. That's really neat. Then another question, I guess, is, okay, so say I've used this Phoenix.new and I've developed something. It's running on a Fly machine, and I can share that URL to friends and people, and they can interact with it too. Now, can I take that app that it's generated and download it locally and continue development, deploy it somewhere else? Is that something that's open?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just do the hamburger menu has a git clone URL. So there's like it's this like obscenely long git clone URL. Like I tokenize the URL. That way we can authorize back. Because the problem, like SSH is like getting SSH keys on the box. Like we have the GitHub command line integration, and you can do like GH auth login, and then it will give you the like one-time password GitHub flow. So you can do private GitHub stuff with it. But yeah, a lot of these times folks just want to like clone the thing locally, right? You just want to click the download button. So the git clone command will give you that. So you just like copy pasta, copy to clipboard, and then paste it in your local CLI, and then it would just clone it just like a GitHub clone URL. It's just going to be a short-lived tokenized URL for that.
Does that eject from the flow at that point, or can you still like vibe code?
You can git push and pull back and forth, which is pretty interesting. So you can also copy a git push command. So like, and we Fly replay that in the same way. So the Elixir app is receiving those git requests, and the git remote that you set is also a tokenized URL. And when it receives the git push on the Phoenix app and the endpoint, we intercept the request. So, if it starts with like /git, we'll do the token auth there, and then we Fly replay to your IDE, which has a reverse proxy on it, and that reverse proxy. So it's proxies all the way down. The Fly proxy proxies to your app. Your endpoint acts as a proxy, does a Fly replay back to the proxy. That proxy proxies it to a reverse proxy on your IDE. That thing is running a Git HTTP backend that it reverse proxies to actually hit a bare Git repo on the box. It's that simple. But again, LLMs help me do all of this, right? So it's like, I can't imagine like not having LLM assisted development in building Phoenix.new. So it's like I had tried out like 3 reverse proxies in one evening that needed to do, like WebSocket reverse proxy, needed to do all this crazy, like Git HTTP backend is like a kind of like a CGI script. I didn't even know that was a thing, but if you ask an LLM for it, it tells you. So that's the Git workflow, local Git workflow. You can Git push and pull and like collaborate locally and push up your changes. And the agent has a file system watcher. So like any file change you make yourself is immediately going to be in context. So like it's not going to stomp on your work where, if you change the router or any file and then the agent thinks it's an older version that it modified, it like immediately has that sent up to the server in memory.
When this went live, I had one of the very first questions I got from a coworker was, is this something that we could upload our whole app to and have it code on? And, I started thinking about that, and it's like, okay, really, what is this? Who is this for? Like, what is this intended for right now? And there may be something different in the future, but for right now, because I was thinking about that, and, my view is it's perfect for greenfield apps, because I think of, well, what would it take to get this other app running on there? It's like, well, we have this very complicated thing. We got other databases, non-Postgres databases. Like, there's a whole lot to set up to get a working, running machine. So really, from your perspective, is that something I should be able to do and could think like taking my existing app and push it up there and start vibe coding on it? What's the right use case for this?
So I would say yes, absolutely. You use the term vibe coding. So yes, like if you want, you could push your whole code base up. Like, you can just copy git push and do a git push and your code base is going to be there. And then you just start a new chat and you say, hey, I have a code base in Mark's app. CD into there and let's get to work. And it's going to start poking around, and if there's a README, it'll probably read the README. And but basically, you can ask in broken English, like, I think we've got like a Postgres timescale DB thing. I'm not sure. I think Redis is in there. Like, and it's basically, my next question would be like, depending on the amount of tokens you want to burn, I would be willing to bet where you just push it up and you tell it to get it running. And you don't even have to tell it what dependencies are there, but like, giving it some idea of like, I'm pretty sure there's a, whatever Redis, RocksDB, doesn't matter. It's going to get the thing running because these agents are, amazing at like this recursive iteration. Like it will brute force whatever it needs to brute force to solve the problem of getting whatever thing's running. So this is all to say that like, I absolutely want to have a really great experience for existing code bases, but like the system prompt is definitely geared towards like vibe coding from scratch right now. So I think it'll do a reasonable job, but like if you want to get more of a pair mode, you have to scream at it, because like its system prompt examples are mostly just like it's building the whole app, right? So it's the whole problem of people say that LLMs get carried away. Like right now is like all it's seen is I'm a full app generator. So if you want it to not behave in a way that's just going to go off and do work, you need to like tell it like at every step, ask me for the next steps. So I want to add like a pair mode toggle. So like right now it's like vibe mode or autopilot mode. So I definitely want to focus on next on a pair mode. And I think it will be like very little work to get there, because that's mostly just, again, the system prompt, like the examples you give it will be different. And then the just messaging will be different on like always wait for the next step from the user. So that's something I want to definitely move towards. But if you specifically want to push your app up and vibe on an existing app, it will absolutely just go full ham. So try it. I will throw credits your way, Mark. If the IP whatever IP agreements with your company, if you want to put your code up, I will give you kind of free reign to let me know how it goes. But these things are remarkable at just poking around your code base. Like you could just tell it CD into the app and let's get to work, and it's going to start like doing ls on the files. It's going to poke around and it will give you a summary of like what the app's doing. So like this is like kind of like a GitHub workflow that people were being really excited on Twitter about with Codex. Like someone gave an example of like, clone this, I'm a new team member, and here's the company code base, clone the URL, evaluate the issues, find a couple things in the code base that's like, describe the architecture to me. And they were blown away when it like gave them this like result document of like everything, getting them up to speed. And like I did the same thing on Phoenix.new and it just did the thing, right? So like that's like, they're amazing at that. So like if you just told it something along those lines, it will be able to give you insights about the app. Without you telling like what dependencies are there.
You're mentioning Jules or Codex for OpenAI. Like these are new APIs hosted by these cloud platforms masquerading as LLMs at this point, right? Where the difference for these new APIs is that the state is held there now versus where it used to be locally, where you have to continually feed that state back to itself in these kind of stateless requests up to like chat completion endpoints. That state alone, I think, is what essentially qualifies this as a runtime now, right? Because that state exists somewhere. I'm kind of curious, where is that state, in this case for Phoenix.new, is that state going to be like exposed? Is this going to be an API kind of like base thing with Fly? Is it all like local, on that container where there's just a running, app there, like sidecar app that's like controlling things?
Yeah, so I think stay tuned for like there's like definitely building blocks here that have fallen out of the Phoenix.new effort that I think that will open up for other people to build things on, because like everyone in this space has this problem, right? Like you now have the perfect word that you mentioned, David, is state, right? That makes all this possible. So it's like, how do you hold this state? How do you have this execution model around this state? How do you actually like version and snapshot it, right? So like the apt workflow is amazing, but like it would be really nice to be like, go full ham on this. And then you're like, okay, yeah, let's like, let's roll back. Let's get rid of those app packages, get rid of the, so it's not just like the branching workflows make sense. And I think our workflow is Git based. So every file change it makes does a Git commit. When it can do branching, and it will commit on the branch, and then since it has Git, it just squashes, right? So it's like it's all these things. Like its Git workflow is just you have Git, and every file tool it calls has to give us a commit message. So like there is no separate Git commit tool. It just like every file change it makes is a commit. But this is all to say that like that's necessary, but that's not enough when you have these full runtimes, because like it's not just the code SHA, it's like everything that was working at that point. So I think that there's some really interesting things we can do from like snapshotting the entire runtime. Not there yet. Right now there's Git and you have a fly machine, but it's backed by, so there's a fly volume there. We're also doing some pretty obscene stuff with object storage. We'll probably write about that. I'm sure we'll write about this, but yeah, so it's basically like it's syncing with object storage, the entire file system right now, because fly volumes are really great at giving a fly machine durable storage, but like if that host dies, there's no backup, right? It's just like if your laptop dies, there's no remote backup, it's done. So we want some redundancy there. So we're actually having the redundancy in object storage right now. So we can basically throw away the volume in the machine, and your IDE will automatically get claimed by a new IDE. And other than probably a longer like a startup logo time, you wouldn't know the difference. All I could say about that right now, but I'm sure we'll write about kind of the obscene. We'll probably write about the obscene sidecar and like overlay FS stuff we're doing to make that happen. Because like no one knows that, right? Like you just like write a file and it's there, but like it looks like a file system, but there's some crazy stuff happening behind the scenes that works.
And that's not Tigris or Tigris. That's not.
It Tigris? Is writing. Yeah. Ultimately, we're using Tigris right now.
Got it. It is Tigris. Got it.
So I was just curious. You talked about how good the LLMs were at doing some of these things, and they were good at Elixir. And I was just curious your experience of having it write good Phoenix code. How much tuning to the prompts or examples, or what did you have to do to make it so it'd give you good Phoenix code that you're like happy with?
Yeah, a lot less than I thought. Again, like this whole journey has been like a revelation to me. And I think like, again, the people working in this space are overly complicating it. And also like people's intuitions that aren't in the space also think it's far more complicated, if that makes any sense. So like, I just assumed it would be hard to like fill the gaps, but it turns out like it's really not. So the LLMs, like they're just like people, and well, not just like people. They're really good at being fake people, but the things that they get hung up on is the same things that like people in Elixir form get hung up on. So it's actually really interesting on like the stumbling blocks are much the same as like people, which kind of makes sense in a lot of ways, because like, if there's less data to be trained on, it's more likely that people would also see the things less, right? But it's like just simple, like silly things like one of the biggest gotchas was, or like the bracket index-based access on a list in Elixir. Every frontier model will constantly do that, right? Like, my array 2 or 0, and Elixir is going to blow up with that access. So there's like we're talking like a few lines in the system prompt, but like just most of it is like silly things like that like get it past those silly gaps. And once you can coax it to like not make the dumb mistakes, then you're just teaching it like new things. So like Phoenix 1.8 is in RC. It's basically, it should be final now, but I've been a little bit busy. So it's pretty much ready. But like, that changed the layout. So now like app layouts is just a function component. So the hilariously frustrating thing is like, you finally get these things that behave well in Phoenix.new internally, and then Phoenix 1.8 comes out and I'm like, well, let's get the RC on there, right? And then like getting the agent to wrap every live view in like a layouts.app function component, right? Because like now you explicitly call your layout. It was like 50% hit or miss on whether it would follow those instructions, even with like lots of coaxing in the system prompt. I'm not just saying one line, right? Like I had to put quite a bit of coaxing, and it would still only do it 50% of the time. But the thing is, like, that's what a person would do, right? It's like muscle memory, right? Like you or I, the three of us, like we would go and forget to wrap it in an app layout because it's new, right? We're not used to like having to call that. So like the LLMs struggle with that too. So so finally, like, it does it pretty much 100% of the time now, but it was like a lot of coaxing to have it do something completely new, but in the same way that folks would also just forget, like, oh yeah, this is a new thing. So I forget where I was going. Oh, how good it was with Elixir and Phoenix. So yeah, most of it is like little gotchas you have to remind it around. The world knowledge is, for most of these frontier models, is good enough that they do like a reasonably good job, like better than anyone's, like the tribal knowledge of like, oh, it's all AI slop, it's going to be bad. Like they write remarkably good Elixir. Like the Ecto queries, like if you ask for like a reporting anything, like it's going to write Ecto queries that like I would have no idea how to write, right? Like it's like just like SQL. I've been doing SQL since like the year 2000, but like my SQL knowledge is like just good enough to do joins, and then like, you know, I don't even know, like, you know, the with clause, who knows? Like there's a whole world of SQL that I've been able to professionally, you know, skirt around that exists. And then you add that to Ecto, and now these things are writing like better Ecto queries than I would write myself. And they write like well-defined interfaces. And it's not this AI slop that people just assume. So I think like in general, people's intuition is wrong. And it's mostly just been our effort on Phoenix.new is just like gap filling, kind of like where it stumbles. And then like the other trick, which is like not surprising, is like you also need to lint the code. So like every file save that happens, we will lint it, whether it's JavaScript, CSS, Elixir, Ruby, Go. So we can actually do most languages, but you get the feedback loop of like, we will immediately call mixed format as a linter on every file change. We can't compile immediately because, you know, it could be in progress work. But just giving it that ability to recursively fix itself also gets you past those gaps, right? Because people are used to like copy and paste and, oh, it made this dumb error. And then you have to go back and tell it it made the error. But now it's like, no, now you have to wait for some tokens to be pecked out, but it can fix those silly mistakes that I think people were using to say that it was bad at Elixir. Far better than people think. I feel like on par with any JavaScript I've asked these things to write.
You've gone a long way to show your hate for code generators. This is this is a lot of effort to get rid of code generators out of Phoenix. Well, I'm just kidding, obviously. So there's on the guides, there's a heading called Phoenix Express, right? Which is a curl command to new.phoenixframework.org. You pass in some, you know, whatever your name is, and it just pipes right into your shell, and that generates a Phoenix application. And now you're going to have this like LLM version of that almost does the same thing, but perhaps not with, you know, the statically generated, you know, code generated stuff right out of Phoenix.new. It's going to be, you know, whatever your app idea is. And, you know, I know it's a UI now, but I figure there will eventually be like well, sure, it's going to be UI based, you know, at some point, but maybe you can start it off like headlessly and then open it up to see where it landed.
I'm glad you asked that, because that's where I see, and this is a contentious topic. So again, forward-looking statement, but that's where I see all of programming going, which like makes people call me bad names on YouTube. So like programmers hate hearing this, and like, you know, I've been doing this for decades now. I think the majority of our code iteration and execution is going to be happening non-locally. And I think the reason that is these things can do useful work when we're not around. So Phoenix.new is basically built headlessly from the start. I'm going to say by accident. I forget at which point I had this intention, but I'm going to say it was built headlessly at the start because like Elixir's stateful, right? So it's like in building Phoenix.new, everything like the agent's running, the Elixir, well, the LLM agent is an Elixir gen server, which we have the term agent too in Elixir, but we already had this stateful thing running. So if you go to Phoenix.new now, it's already headless. So like you can ask it to make an app, you can go away, close the tab, shut down your browser, check your laptop out the window, and return from anywhere on the internet, and it's going to be there working with your app accessible. And that to me is like the future of how most of these I'm going to say grunt work iterations happen right now. You know, how far that progresses to make us just kind of these knob turners, I'm not sure. But I mean, they're useful now. They can do useful work when we're not around right now. So to me, it's going to be silly to have it not be doing useful things when our laptop's shut. So it's like my bigger bet for the future is like it is going to be headless. I mean, you can still do local dev, but you're going to be collaborating with like, you know, your other team member is going to be this thing in the cloud doing stuff for you. And Phoenix.new can do that already. So like you can have it vibe an app, go away. You can have it go work on a GitHub issue and then tell it to send a PR, and it's just going to do that while you're not there. So it already is headless. And the funny thing is the I like to market that we have a full in-browser IDE because most of these Vibe platforms don't. They give you like some nerfed JavaScript IE. So we just give you VS Code in the browser. But the funny thing is, like, that's nothing more than eye candy for a human. As funny as that is to say, it's like we give you a full IDE in the browser, but all that is, like, you seeing those things pecked out is just eye candy. Like, I mean, you can do work inside of it, but the agent doesn't matter, right? Its runtime is communicating with the IDE over Phoenix channels. So like the VS Code IDE can go away, fail to start for whatever reason, and like that agent's still just telling it to run shell over a Phoenix channel, telling it to write a file. So we're just, in fact, when the agent's done writing the file, there can be some racing there with I had to write a VS Code extension. I always end up running a ton of JavaScript, first of all. So there's a race. So anyway, all I do when I write a file, when the agent is done with the tokens, it sends a file write over Phoenix channel, and all the file write that ultimately makes it to the VS Code extension, all we do is call revert file, because like you could have multiple tabs up. This is a long answer because I'm reloading in my head. If you have multiple tabs up and you have, oh no, this is why. You can't rely on VS Code to write the file because, again, the whole point is to run headlessly. So all we do when VS Code sees a file written is I just call revert file in case one of your tabs had erased any of the tokens, or you just want that thing to be up to date with whatever's on disk. So it's like, it's literally just eye candy for us slow humans, nothing more. So anyway, yeah, that's where we're at. We are headless, and I think that's the future of most of the kind of like tedious iterations that we do. Yeah. Maybe a starting point on any issue. You're like, let the thing burn some tokens on it, and then we pop in if the tests fail.
There's going to need to be some like disambiguation of what people mean by Phoenix.new now. Like there's
I know. So here's the thing.
There's Phoenix.new. There's the new.phoenixframework.org.
I didn't consider this. Phoenix.new was available, and we were like, oh my god, we have to buy that, right? And then I hadn't realized until I got to ElixirConf EU, just talking to people, it was like, oh man, there's a clash there. Yeah. So as dumb as that sounds, I had not considered the clash. It was mostly like, oh, this is an amazing name. I mean, it's quite a good name, right? For like a vibe coding a Phoenix app. I just hadn't really truly appreciated the overlap, even though it's literally the same. Yeah.
There is another like phx.new domain out there too by someone else. So like there's a lot of news out there.
Well, maybe we can briefly talk about how this has been received. I think it's a truism of the internet. If you do anything public, you will get hate. If you stand up, if you poke your head up above the crowd, someone's going to throw something at you. So you said people call you names on YouTube and things like that. But yeah, this was on Hacker News. I've seen on Twitter and social media, people talking about this, people sharing it in work Slacks that they're seeing it, so it's really making the rounds. It's getting a lot of attention. What has your experience been like? Because you've said some people are very, have a lot of angst perhaps around some of this. Like, what has this been like for you?
Yeah, it's been like, it's a really weird time. You've got like one camp, like myself, like I feel like I'm a god tier programmer. Like, building this mostly solo up to this point has been like this revelation of like, oh my God, like, I'm able to write like a Node.js reverse proxy, and I stood up Nginx. I stood up this thing called Traffic to test it out. So like all of these things. Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. It was like WebSockets weren't working on Nginx for the VS Code code server, even though Nginx can do WebSockets. So anyway, it was like all this stumbling blocks, and then LLMs were like, well, you could try Trafic or whatever. And I was like, well, how do I try that? And then 30 minutes later, I was trying that, and then it worked for WebSockets. And it's just been this like revelation for me of like, I can't imagine not having these tools now. And then you have other people that literally to this day are saying, I find absolutely zero value out of LLMs doing code. And I don't know how to rectify these two realities, like in my head, because like, again, I feel like a crazy person. I'm like, I'm empirical evidence over here on this side. Like, I don't know how such a statement could be made. So it's a really weird time. And I think a lot of it is like angst and fear driven, or just ignorance. And then like the YouTube comment was like on my ElixirConf talk was like, you can stop watching it in 9 minutes because it's AI slop from there on out. And it's like literally half my talk was addressing this whole conversation about AI slop. Anyway, so it's just a bizarre world. But I will say, so leading up to this, I've had a lot of my own angst and anxiety about like, how is this going to be received? There's so much terrible discourse as it is. And there's still like, there are some negative comments, but it's been like remarkably positive. Like beyond what I could have hoped based on like my expectations. So like we've had like hundreds of people sign up already, and it's like you have to pay money. So it's like, I feel like as an open source, I mean, I've run my own business before. Like just getting people to sign up at all for a free service is tough, right? Like just getting anyone in the door, even if you're not without a credit card, is tough. So it's been, I think, far more positive with people trying it out, and then like just the positive reactions on like I do think that like LLMs and agent workflows are more expensive than folks think if they're not in this space. Like if you're using Cloud Code every day, I think people will have an intuition for like, oh, these things actually like cost a lot of money. But like what we're seeing from like actual real users is remarkable, because folks are like, I burned all my credits, but oh my God, this thing is a miracle. And like, they want to like keep using it. So I think like we're in this space where like these things are amazingly valuable, even though like it may be expensive, and like not everyone's going to have the same experience. But like, if you can get this thing to generate some boilerplate for you that would have taken you a week, and that cost you $20, then like, I don't know, it's like, there's a lot of value there, right? So so far it's been far more positive than I could have hoped. And we're seeing folks like, there was a guy on Hacker News that was a PHP developer that had never tried Elixir, and he was like, it's now or never. So he tried Phoenix.new, signed up, and like built a multiplayer tic-tac-toe game with like multiple rooms where like people could create their own room and then play against other people. And it used live view, and he had never, like, he didn't know how these things worked, but it was like, and then he deployed it on fly. So it's like, that kind of thing is incredible to me, because like, I think we take for granted in the Elixir community, like what we can do. Like we talk about it, but like someone coming in and like trying to replicate that in PHP would have been a lot of work, right? Like you have this state, you have these real-time updates, you have all this, and like someone was able to get that in a fully designed collaborative manner in no time. And so like, yeah, it seemed like I was worried that people in Hacker News would think it was an AstroTurf comment. It was like so good, right? It was like, we both like converted them to Elixir and Phoenix user. They deployed on fly, so we converted them into a fly user. Anyway, it was like, it made my day, but it was like, oh my gosh, like there's multiple user journeys here that I think are remarkable. And like one is like complete newbie that's never programmed. Like my nephew is 8 years old and has used this and like made his own little gaming website. Which was pretty fun. And now we have someone that's a programmer, but they've never used Elixir and Phoenix, and they use that as kind of like an entry into then go back and poke and see what it did to kind of like learn the ins and outs. So I think we have like from the full spectrum of like experienced developers. So like what I've done in building Phoenix.new is like I stuck it on work on Phoenix.new, so it worked on itself. Which like it can work on itself, except it can't work on its parser, its token parser, because it will. It's like Claude has any large language model, like its internal format, if it starts like reading that and trying to reproduce it, like our own parser will break trying to parse the code. So because like it would need special escaping anyway. So it's funny. It's like I can't use it for all work because it's like a self-hosted compiler issue basically.
Yeah.
But I've had it do benchmarking where the token rate limiter currently is like you want to, tokens just cost real money. So any input token you send or output token, you want to count that. And like a failed request could actually cost you like, let's say tens of cents. Like if someone like sent a request up and then canceled it real quick before getting the full response, like you want to make sure you catch these things. So like I have an ETS-based counter that is counting tokens, and then we persist that to Postgres periodically. So we don't crush the database. And I wrote this like gen server. Well, LLM wrote half of gen server for me to start this. I pieced the rest together, and then I wanted to benchmark it. Like, okay, like when we go to the sync step, I think it's every 30 seconds right now. When we persist, what kind of throughput can I get? So I just like stuck Phoenix.new on it. I just said, I want to benchmark this gen server with ETS. And, it's using Ecto inside the gen server. So like all the test harnessing, all the harnessing around that sandbox, like there's a lot of like BS around trying to just get this thing running in a way that you can like run it in a hot loop. So anyway, I just asked it to benchmark it, and it actually, what it ended up doing with, again, haphazard English, like, hey, let's benchmark this. It pulled out the critical path of the code into an EXS file. So instead of trying to benchmark the gen server, like it intuited, I'm going to say it made the decision of like, here's like what actually matters, right? Like we're not testing like a handle call. We actually, this thing schedules work itself, and then it runs this persist block. So it set up an EXS file and just duplicated the code, did a bunch of ETS insert setups, and then did a persist. And then so basically it extracted the code, the critical path, and ran that in a tight loop, and then gave me a tabular output, breaking down into graduated steps of amount of records that it's persisting. So like I asked for none of this, right? I was like, let's benchmark this. And it gave me this really pretty printed console output of like 1,000 records, 10,000 records, 100,000 records. Then it wrote a markdown summary for me. And it got like 2 to 3 million inserts a second into ETS. And I think it benchmarked up like 100,000 inserts into Postgres. Anyway, it was like in Claude, it was Claude. It was like, it said like, wow, in all caps. So like it blew itself away with like how well it scaled. And I made it prove to me that like it didn't mess up its calculations.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you're getting a little too excited. Like, and it walked through and explained the benchmark code that it did. So anyway, this is a long answer. I think like it's remarkable to see like just the spectrum of like never have developed anything, experienced developer, but never use Elixir. And then someone like me that's like built Phoenix and I'm still like seeing value. So I think like broad spectrum, people are going to have a fundamental shift in the workflow. Not necessarily with Phoenix.new, but something like it, like whether it's Codex or Jules or Cloud Code, whenever Anthropic decides to put it remote, because I feel like that's just what makes sense to me. I don't know how, if they're not working on that already, they should be. I think that's the future, because anyone across this like programmer journey, product market manager hat could be able to use this. Anyway, there's my really long answer.
My final question really is, what do you see as the next step? You've mentioned a number of different ideas and things. So what is it next for you, either for Phoenix.new or, what's next? Because you said you got Phoenix 1.8, the RC, maybe that's coming up soon.
Yeah, so Phoenix 1.8 final is pretty much ready. LiveView 1.1, thanks to Stefan on the Phoenix team. He's been filling in the gaps as I've been kind of MIA trying to get this out. We have some amazing stuff like co-located hooks that have been long promised that Stefan just went off and owned and completed that entirely. So I'm very excited about that, just because like all my hooks are usually like little bits that I want to just sprinkle in, and now you can just write them in line in your heeks. So that's something to keep an eye out for. And then, yeah, Phoenix.new from here, the product is just going to be something that we continue to iterate on. So I really want to explore, I think, growing this to like async workflows, even though you can do async now. I want to focus on like the Devon or the Codex type workflows where just kind of really nail it being useful beyond just like you asking for a new app, because we need new apps, but we don't need new apps, every day. And I think that LLMs are useful to us every day, but not for going off in the wilderness and building something, but just doing these little tasks.
Yeah.
So that's something I definitely want to explore next. And then also something probably beyond just Elixir and Phoenix, because you can ask it for pretty much any language now, and it's going to do a reasonable job, even though its system prompt is like, you're a Elixir and Phoenix developer. I mean, the first thing my coworker did was ask it to build a Rails app, and it gave us a working Rails app with database and CRUD and everything. So it's like, I think we probably will grow beyond just Elixir and Phoenix, but right now it's focused on nailing that stack, because why not?
Well, I think that's awesome. I mean, it's good for Fly in terms of marketing for the platform, getting people to do greenfield apps. I'm really excited to hear about people coming to Elixir through something like this. It's like, oh, I can get all of these advanced features like PubSub and live updates, multi-user, all that kind of stuff, because Elixir and Phoenix do it so well. And then this can actually help me get the thing that I want done really fast, and then I can learn and grow from there. So I think that's just wonderful.
That was a thesis. So like, there's a lot of concern in Elixir about with LLMs getting better, is the language choice going to be irrelevant? Mm-hmm. And I think that's been a legitimate conversation. And part of Kurt, the Fly CEO, like his thesis was like, if languages don't matter, then like why can't Elixir and Phoenix be the thing that doesn't matter? If that makes any sense. Like,
yeah, everyone used that because
yeah. Like, and I got that mindset, but it was like coming into this, I didn't think I thought that was something that was potentially far off, but now we have like this anecdote on Hacker News on like someone already, you can see that future now, right? Where it's like this PHP developer came in and had no idea how any of this worked and didn't touch a line of code, and he had what he asked for and was blown away by it, and he's an experienced developer. So in that regard, like I do think there's something compelling here about Elixir and Phoenix and what it would take to replicate, let's say in JavaScript or PHP on like, there's V0 dev, there's these things that can build really compelling front ends, but like when you want to do anything, I'm going to say real, and these frameworks can do real things. I don't want to dunk too hard, but like that integration point becomes a lot of glue, even for an LLM to write, right? It's like, Well, now what decision? Again, you're placing all these decisions on like, how do I stand up with next WebSockets? And that turns out to be like something they intentionally don't want to make easy. So it's like you have all these things that suddenly now, just like a human would have to try to do, and the agent's going to have to try to do. How do you actually add a database now? And Elixir and Phoenix can just be like, no, the agent just writes like a file and you have this real-time thing. So I think there's a future here where we could be kind of positioned really specially in this like idealized, like, well, maybe we can be the thing that doesn't matter that people don't know about by and large. And that would be like a best case outcome. But I think we're not there, but like I'm actually seeing that now in some of these responses where you can actually see a glimpse of like, yeah, I think there's something here and maybe we can position ourselves instead of being on the side of like afraid of this future, like maybe we can actually, maybe we are the perfect platform to be that future.
I remember one of the feelings I got when you announced Live View. You said it several times, right? It was like, look at all these things I don't have to worry about, you know? And infrastructure is commonly like that. Like a lot of these infrastructure companies, you know, end up, well, Vercel, you know, they manage Next.js. They, you know, that's their deal. They deploy that now. And so they have a stake in the framework at this point. Like, what if you just didn't really have to worry about much of that anymore? And it can be simplified, you know, but that was the feeling, was like, this simplifies so much. I don't have to ask so many questions now to get something up and running. We were talking about the code generators before, and by code generators, I mean like the static ones, like mix Phoenix.new. It's always wonderful to start there and it looks great, you know, but it isn't a real app until it's deployed somewhere. And then that's another like 2 days to get it deployed somewhere. And I know that, you know, Fly makes that easy as well. It's not too hard to do that, but in like other infrastructure stacks, like it is a bit to get up there. And with Phoenix.new, the service, that's no longer a thing. It's deployed.
So yeah, it's deployed as a dead server. I mean, you could ask the agent to make the environment prod. Yeah, so it's deployed in that it's running on a Debian Ubuntu box. It's gonna pretty closely match what you deploy it to. But there is an internal pending PR for a deploy pane workflow to actually turn that into a long-lived app. So I think that's like right, but that's like obviously the actual next step, right? It's we built the app for you. Like if you want to, I mean, it will run all month as long as Mix Phoenix phx.server is running in the agent shell. So like it will run there, but if you actually, but it's like, it's your dev environment though. So it's like, if you want to use that as like, now let's put this to prod, that should be something that the agent can just be like, would you like to deploy now?
That would be
like,
so
yes. Cool. You could also just run fly deploy yourself, right, on the agent shell. So it's funny. It's like, you know, you could also just deploy yourself from either locally or on the thing. But I think that's, I mean, an obvious thing for us to do. And that work's essentially done. Just need to get it out.
Well, congrats, Chris, on pulling this off, doing so much of it by yourself, but with Phoenix and Elixir and what Fly had in terms of the infrastructure. And I just think all of that speaks volumes to what you can do with a good tech combo. And as you see, like these whole other companies are creating, you know, millions of dollars of funding, all these teams of people, and like you did it on Fly. You know, like I just think that's amazing. Well, where would you like to send people if, you know, they've listened to this, they're interested in anything you've said, where should they go?
Yeah, just Phoenix.new. Check it out. Share with me what you build if it's something that you can share publicly, just because like I live vicariously through like the things people build. So it's just fun seeing the stuff that folks come up with. Like when someone tweeted out, they made their own Gmail client, so they fully vibe coded. Like it was actually their inbox in the browser, like Elixir syncing with the whatever Google APIs. I have no idea, right?
Oh,
maybe
wow.
Maybe they don't either. They asked anyway. So it's like I thought it was a mock-up, and it turns out it was like, no, those are real emails. Like that's a Fly billing statement. So anyway, it's like I like literally makes my day seeing the stuff folks build. So if you do check it out, share what you built with me, and I'll throw you some credits if it makes my day.
I guess I'd also just plug your ElixirConf EU talk, where you talked about code generators are dead, long live code generators. And
yeah, definitely check that out. It gives some, I think, insight to the space. I try to simplify it because it's overly complicated in general. And I kind of talk about some of the tricks we do as well with like some of the tool calls that we're doing. So it's definitely worth checking out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.